Hi everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and today we are going to do kind of a mishmash of things in order to try to finish up, well not completely, but make a good chunk of a dent into our Estes Loadstar II. So in the intervening time, the nose cone and the base of the nose cone I've painted black. They need to come apart. I've also put some wood fill on the fins here, at least the first coat. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to deal with the nose cone, basically finish that assembly, and then we are going to deal with painting, not painting, but putting the wood fill sealer on these. So might as well do that first. I'm just using a all-purpose wood sealer here. It's going to get brushed on, making some lovely sounds. We'll get rid of the second stage at least for a little bit. So I'm just going to brush this on as if it were paint. It doesn't need to go on thickly. Since I put on the wood fill, I sanded this down. So basically the idea here is that we're putting various coats on to the wood to fill in the grain, and then we're sanding off the excess. And ideally, after a few goes at this, the grain will essentially all be filled in. So when we sand it, we're sanding off the extraneous bits and hopefully leaving the whatever it is, either the wood fill or this sealer, inside the grains to kind of build them up without building everything else up as well. This is rather difficult to do sometimes, to see where you've been and where you haven't. So you probably can't see, but I'm holding it at such an angle so that I can see a reflection. The sealant here is kind of shiny when you painted it on, so I can see my brush strokes that way. And this goes fairly quickly. The previous step that I did not include, although I've shown it in other videos, is applying the wood filler, and that is more tedious work, if for no other reason than it's somewhat hard to get the consistency exactly where I would like it to be. My little container of wood fill is essentially empty at this point. There's the tiniest bit left. And while it comes in a container that was initially more like putty, it has over the years dried out, which is annoying, but it is what's going to happen. And it's dried out to the point where I have to reconstitute it. And even if it were brand new, it doesn't quite have the consistency that I'm looking for. So I dilute it with the tiniest bit of water, at least when it's a fresh can. So that way it is paintable, let's say. But it's really hard to get that consistency exactly where I want it. Usually I end up with it too thin, which, I mean, it's not a horrendous problem. Got a little speck of something there. Let's get rid of that. Initially, though, when I did this, I had it entirely too thick, and that you can at least fix by getting it wet. All right, so I have coated all 6 faces of this. Same deal with the larger fin. Now this one, for some reason, I got like glue or something on here, and so far my attempts to make the glue line, which is right there, disappear have been largely unsuccessful. Hopefully it's not actually like raised above the wood, it's just discolored at this point, because I can live with that because we're going to paint over it, and any discoloration would end up becoming invisible. I need a bit more paint. By the way, ideally you should be doing one face of this then another. I didn't do that on the first one. do it on this. The reason is that getting the fins wet can sometimes deform them, allow them to warp. Now, I'm not too concerned about this because these are thicker fins, and I already put a layer of a wood fill on it, so there's kind of like there's a coating to protect it from having that happen. But you know, it's good habit to get into, doing one side then the other, especially if you're working with thin fins, thin balsa fins. Yeah, they can warp very quickly. Truly, thin fins of any material. I mean, plastic, you're not going to be doing this too, but basswood, balsa, if it's thin enough, it'll warp. All right, so we've got one fin left here. By the way, see there's a big old glob there on the leading edge. Make sure that you don't leave any globs when you're doing this, or even when you're putting the wood fill layer on. Now, I've sanded to try to get rid of any leftover goop, but you spent the time to shape the fins. You really don't want that undone by an unfortunate blob that you somehow missed. Okay, that looks pretty good. Just quickly checking. There's a bit of a notch in that. I should probably sand that off at some point, but now is not the time for that. Fins look pretty good, by the way. So some of the wood fill over here, unfortunately, I got, when I was brushing it on, it got on the body tube, which is fine. It sands down very nicely. If I really, really wanted this to look great, notice the wood fill right here has filled in the spiral of the tube. So you certainly could take the time to go filling in all these gaps. I don't think I'm going to do that because it is rather irritating, rather time consuming. And I just don't care that much. The finish will be fine. All right, so I'm going to kind of brush this excess off. As soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to go clean my brush. But before that happens, it is time to deal with the nose cone. Now, typically, I would break out my hobby knife and cut through. But just for the sake of doing things a little bit differently, let's try some power tools. So instead of hobby knife, I'm going to go with rotary tool, brand name rotary tool that I'm not advertising. All right, so in any event, this will probably make a somewhat awful racket, so yeah, sorry in advance. The good news is that I checked this before I cut it. Now, it's not going to fit in like nicely like this. I'm going to have to angle the blade. But if I'm careful, I should be able to get the blade just in there without doing any real damage. But I'm going to go slowly. I'm going to try this on the slow speed first. And if that doesn't really do the trick, then I'm going to bump it up to the high speed. Now, one last bit of caution here. I have my safety goggles because while I have played somewhat fast and loose with safety rules, for instance, with like CA, for instance, this stuff does say, various instructions say, that you should really protect your eyes from using that. I probably should, but this is definitely one of the things where plastic bits could fly, and I really don't want them flying into my eyeball. All right, so safety goggles on. Safety goggles are dirty. That's fun. Clean safety goggles. Yeah, still kind of cloudy, but I don't know. I probably use these enough so that those are impacts rather than like dust. All right, so again, I'm going to try carefully to cut in like this. I'm going to start with it on the low speed and see what happens there. Yeah, this is pretty deep plastic. okay with this taking a few tries. All right, let's stop and take some stock of what we've done. Now, I have not cut the whole way through. I have made a couple little tiny notches there, but the fix to that is going to be, I'm going to grab a Sharpie and just draw over top of it, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I think at this point, let's see how deep the cut is, because if it's deep enough, I might just say, good enough, let's just break out the X-Acto hobby knife and do the rest of the job. I've notched it fairly well here. Certainly well enough that the hobby knife is doing its job without any particular trouble. Yeah, there we go. All right. So that certainly saved me the time of trying to hack through. And I don't know, I just got the impression looking at this that it was going to be pretty thick. So I feel justified in my decision here. All right, so looking at these, they definitely need to be sanded, like absolutely, because these things are nasty looking. In fact, I think instead of, eventually I'll sand it, but to start, I think I'm going to kind of use the hobby knife here to whittle them down a little bit. So they're also not particularly, it's not that they aren't a clean cut, but they could be better. This, by the way, it's not even aesthetic at this point. This is kind of like, I don't want to cut my finger doing, trying to load a payload into this thing. So, yeah. This is definitely not essential. All right. So that is much cleaner. They're obviously white because the plastic was white. So I could go just drop a coat of paint on these just so they look nicer. But I don't think I'm going to do that. As mentioned, I had ever so slightly nicked part of this. And I said I was going to fix that with a Sharpie. Well, this seems like a good place to fix a lot of things with a Sharpie. So, just a plain old black Sharpie for black paint probably will take care of a lot of this. Let's give it a go. I'm just going to this thing. By the way, so the plastic payload bay in here was warped by the way the package was sitting. So I think I'm just going to put this on top for the time being, and that should hopefully reform how that's supposed to be. So there, black Sharpie. I mean, I can see it. The finish is different color, so it's not like it's completely perfect. I should say it's a different reflectivity. It's like one's matte and the other's gloss or something like that. But by the way, too, here I didn't quite get this as black as it should be, but honestly, I'm not going to go back and repaint this because this is going to be not exactly showing exactly. I mean, it is going to be a slightly exposed part of the rocket, but I do mean slightly because the last thing we're going to do in this video is we're going to basically put the payload bay together, which I already did in part. Anyway, yeah. So Sharpie goes on, pretty nicely. There. The interior of this circle here you could still see, but that's, I mean, I could get the pen in there, but it's not worth it. So great, that's done. I don't, well, yeah, I want to color this too. Move that out of the way. Make sure there aren't any spots that I obviously missed, so it looks passable. All right, good enough. Sharpie, you've done an excellent job as always. Okay, now the next thing that needs to happen is, so this is just a cuff of tape. I suppose I should probably take that off. It's not really needed anymore. It was nice because it stood things up a little bit better. There we go. Lovely. Now, the plastic tube part needs to go on like this. Like so. Notice there is some black crud on my fingers. Part of that is because the tape, the glue didn't really adhere to the tape very well. But I also scratched the nose cone ever so slightly, and you can see there's a bit of black on the interior to this. That'll probably come off if I just kind of scrape at it, but I'm also not going to worry about that. So this needs to be attached, and the instructions would have us use plastic cement like this. It doesn't hold particularly well, so that would be plan B. What I'm going to use instead, I think, is crazy glue. But I am going to be rather careful about this, obviously because I should be careful about crazy glue, but also because I don't want to have any like mishaps in getting it most of the way on or not straight or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put glue about, I'd say like 3/4 of the way. I did not actually open the glue completely. That's annoying. I thought I did. Let's try it now. No, this really does not want to open today. All right. These bottles, they seem to have a lifespan for me, and it's not the lifespan of, it doesn't run until I'm out of glue. They tend to come up a little bit short, and then they start to get, like, they glue themselves shut. I'm really not sure why today this is not deciding it wants to come out. Because it looks like I can get the paper clip in just fine. All right. There's a plug. It must be fairly far in there. Seems pretty good. Try it again. Yeah, not sure. All right, well, apparently if the crazy glue has decided it doesn't want to work for me, let's try that now. There's some. I guess that'll have to do. Truthfully, don't need much. Hopefully this will be just the right amount. The viscosity is off too. I'm not entirely sure. There we go. Whoa boy. Now it's decided it wants to come free. And I definitely need to brush that out. Okay. Crazy glue definitely needs to be inspected. All right, this thing needs to go on. It needs to go on right the first time, and it needs to go on quickly. So I'm going to get it kind of lined up, and then, boop, that's on. I'm going to mop up seams because I did squirt a little bit of glue out, in spite of best efforts not to. looks pretty good. Now, there's probably going to have to be a little bit of touch up here with the Sharpie, but it looks pretty good. All right. The top part does not get glued in place, obviously, because then it would not be usable as a payload. But I am going to put the nose cone in here again to properly reform this tube, since it seems like it doesn't want to be. All right. Quickly, before I wrap up, try to cover up any little spots that I see that are chips or whatever happened. The crazy glue doesn't really like paint either. It doesn't like a lot of things, but did a little bit to paint. Okay, so this is done. This is like completely done. This is going to go off and rest someplace, not with the seam touching anything. So it's going to be upside down or something in a cup. But the next step is to let the sealer that we put on dry, and that will be good, and then sand that off. I may need to put on a second layer of fill. If that is the case, I'm not going to film that because it's not super necessary or interesting. Paint comes next, and then the last step is to finish. Paint the different colors and to put the decals on. So I will put the decals on and otherwise finish up the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.